Angelicus and its Spurb.
Okay, well, welcome to Spurbs Herbs episode 98. Today we're going to be talking about Jiao Qiang Tāng, and that is Nine-Herb Decoction with Notopterygium. I love saying Notopterygium. So without further ado, we have a lot to cover, so we're going to get straight into it. So today we will be exploring another Chinese herbal formula, Jiao Qiang Tāng, or Nine-Herb Decoction with Notopterygium. It is under the subcategory of formulas that release exterior wind cold disorders and is useful for treating external attacks or colds with dampness and internal heat. We will be doing our deep dive into this formula as we usually do. And also, as usual, we will be adding something a little different. We are going to briefly introduce postbiotic supplements. We don't have a lot of something different today just because we have so much to cover with this formula. So that's what we're going to be doing. It's going to be another fascinating exploration into the exciting quantum world of herbs. Please power up your mind's tokamak and join us. Before we get going, I wanted to tell you we are starting an amazing special for our courses. If you use them for continuing education, professional development, or just for your own edification, we are offering 50 hours of courses for an unbelievable price. Why 50 hours? Because that's how much is needed. You need 50 hours every 2 years to maintain your license in California. But we also have a smaller one if you're not from California. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But normally, these 50 hours would cost $750. However, with the special code 50 CEUs, that's 50 CEUS, this is going to be only $325 or only $6.50 per hour of class. Plus, you can get a free signed copy of one of my books. Just pay for shipping and handling. That is a free copy of Integrative Pharmacology, combining modern pharmacology with integrative medicine. That is a big old textbook that is shipping on everybody's shelf. Or Playing the Game, a step-by-step approach to accepting insurance as an acupuncturist. Either one of those, free. All you need to do is pay for shipping and handling. What a great deal. So you're getting over half off, way over half off of what we would normally be charging for these, and you get a free book. Unbelievable. Just go to the webpage www.integrativemedicinecouncil.org/CEUS1. So it's Integrative Medicine Council, COUNCIL.org/CEUS1 for this amazing deal. And as I said, we have a deal, a really great deal for half that many hours of courses, so 25 hours of courses at the same page. So just go to that page and you can get a fantastic deal even if you don't need 50 hours of courses. Awesome. Hope to see you there. So I said we were going to talk about postbiotics. So for today's something different, we will be looking at postbiotics. I recently did a course on pro and prebiotics and talked a little bit about postbiotics, which was a topic I was not very familiar with, which is why I do these things. Is I love learning about this stuff. So here's a short introduction to these supplements and whether or not they may be useful. So postbiotics are also called paraprobiotics, parapsychobiotics, ghost probiotics, metabiotics, tyndallized probiotics, and bacterial lysates. They are defined as a preparation of non-living microorganisms and or their components that confers a health benefit on the host. They may include heat-killed probiotics, enzymes, vitamins, polyphenols, short-chain fatty acids, and other components produced by probiotics. Those short-chain fatty acids are very interesting. There's a lot of research going on those short-chain fatty acids right now, and that is really, they're saying that's the big benefit of probiotics at this point, that they change a lot of our non-digestible fibers and things into short-chain fatty acids, which have a health benefit for us. So what are postbiotics used for? They may help reduce weight and gastrointestinal issues, treat colds and flus, and eczema, potentially eczema. But what does the science say on these? Well, that is a good question. I'm glad someone asked that. In general, there only have been small clinical studies looking at postbiotics, and therefore there is little support for their use at this point. It doesn't mean they're not helpful. It means we don't have the evidence to show that they're helpful yet. So we're ahead of the curve. We have a lot more research to do on these postbiotics. These suggest some postbiotics may be helpful for reducing weight and reducing diarrhea. Irritable bowel syndrome, that's irritable bowel syndrome. Crohn's disease, which is part of IBD, or inflammatory bowel disorders, and diverticulitis. So if you have diverticulosis that is inflamed, it's possible that these can be helpful for those. The evidence is mixed if probiotics help colds and flus, and if they are helpful, they're only a slight benefit. At least at the evidence, that's science for you. It's a stepwise process, so we can only say where we're at right now. So it doesn't look like it's particularly helpful for colds or flus, and if it is, it's only of a very slight benefit. They do not appear to be helpful in treating eczema. So the research so far is not very helpful for that. Now, when I taught this course, someone, someone was asking about enzymes and foods and things along those lines in this course. And one of the things that I think the postbiotics are interesting. They have some interesting and beneficial aspects to them, which I think are really, really helpful. However, I feel like I'd rather have live cultures. So that's the probiotics are supposed to be on the live side of things, and I'd rather have those going in, like having live qi into the body, rather than these postbiotics. Though again, if the research changes, then maybe my opinion would have changed on that. So they're very interesting. They're really new. I'm still tending towards pre and postbiotics more than pre and probiotics as opposed to postbiotics, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on as the research comes out more and more. And that's all there is to this amuse-bouche. Let's get into, we have a lot to cover, so let's get into today's formula, or the entree. So today we're talking about Qiāng Huo Tang, or Nine-Herb Decoction with Notopterygium. Other names include Major Notopterygium Decoction, or Da Qiāng Huo Tang, Notopterygium Flush and Harmonized Decoction, or Qiāng Huo Chong He Tang, Flush and Harmonized Decoction, Chong He Tang, Miraculous Release Powder, Shenjie San, Notopterygium powder, Qiāng Huo San. And then we have variants of these same things. So Jiu Wei Chuang Huo Tang can also be spelled in Wei Giles as, instead of Jiu, it can be spelled Chiu. Still pronounced the same. It's still pronounced with a J sound, Jiu, but it's in Wei Giles as opposed to pinyin, which are just ways of using what are called romantic Latin characters, using the Chinese characters. From the Chinese characters. So that's Wei Giles is an older system. It was still used up until about probably around 10 years ago. Taiwan was still using Wei Giles, but they finally switched to pinyin, which has been around since I think the 50s or 60s in China. So mainland China. So they were, not for mainland. So they were avoiding the use of pinyin. But they finally capitulated and said, yeah, the majority of this is now in pinyin. There's a third system that I find is more used scholarly, and older scholarly works, called the Yale system. So the two big ones are Wei Giles and pinyin. And we just went totally off topic, which we love. So that's cool. So another one here is we have Zhou Wei Qiāng Huo Tang. Instead of a Q, it's again same word Qiāng, but instead of a Q, I-A-N-G, it's C-H-I-A-N-G. Also, 9-flavor Qiāng Huo Decoction, and again, that's the C-H-I-A-N-G version of Qiāng. Notopterygium Decoction with 9 herbs, and Notopterygium 9-herb combination. So, very similar. They're all kind of having similar variations of the same thing. So those are all different names for the same formula. This formula is in the subcategory of formulas that release exterior when cold under the category of formulas that release the exterior. Our other usual formulas textbook, Chinese Medical Herbal Formulas and Applications, Pharmacological Effects and Clinical Research by Chen and Chen, says it is in the acrid and warm exterior releasing formula subcategory under the exterior releasing formulas category, which is basically the exact same category. They just translate it slightly differently. So let's talk about these formulas that release the exterior. And we've discussed these in several previous episodes, but we're going to continue to do that. And Shai et al. Describe the overall category in the following way. When a pathogenic, I get it wrong right off the bat. When a pathogenic influence first penetrates the body, it tends to cause a disorder of the exterior. In this context, the term exterior, or biao, denotes the superficial layers of the body comprised of the skin and muscles. These are perfused by the body's protective qi, which is fierce and hot in nature, and whose task it is to warm and defend against penetration into the body by external pathogens. If a pathogenic influence lodges in this aspect of the body, it not only obstructs the normal physiological diffusion of qi and fluids there, but encourages the body to move more protective qi toward the exterior in an attempt to push out the invading pathogen. For this reason, exterior disorders are characterized by fever and chills, indicating obstruction of normal physiological warming, even as protective yang in the exterior tends towards excess, head and body aches, indicating obstruction of qi and fluids in the most yang, i.e. exterior portions of the body, and a floating pulse, indicating the movement of protective yang toward the exterior. Since wind is the vehicle by which other external pathogenic influences enter the body via the exterior, it is involved in most exterior disorders, especially those involving cold and heat. Thus it is said that, quote, wind is the leader of the 100 diseases, or feng wei, bai bing zhi zhang. The symptoms associated with an exterior disorder indicate that the body is actively trying to overcome obstruction of the qi dynamic by one or more of the 6 pathogenic influences. Treatment in Chinese medicine seeks to support these physiological reactions through strategies that release the pathogenic influence from the exterior, jie biao. For this purpose, one deploys light, acrid, moving herbs that unblock obstruction to fuse the protective qi and disseminate fluids to vent pathogenic influences back toward the outside. No other strategy will prevent the pathogenic influence from penetrating more deeply into the body. Often, but not always, this results in sweating. This type of sweating indicates that an obstruction has been overcome and that the qi and fluids can once again stream to the surface of the body. Like the flow of water that breaks through a dam, the sweating may initially be pronounced, especially if a very acrid and warming formula is used. However, the profuse sweating should quickly abate as the body finds its physiological balance. For this reason, releasing the exterior is often equated with inducing sweating. Yet, in many contexts where formulas to release the exterior are used, the sweating may hardly be noticeable, or strong pathological sweating may evolve into a milder physiological sweat. This is because the ultimate goal of these formulas is not to promote sweating, but to unblock and restore order to the flow of qi and fluids. The term release from the exterior was first described in Chapter 5 of Basic Questions. Now, this Basic Questions, this is the Wangdi Neijing Su Wen. So this is the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine, and that's broken down into 2 parts. One of those is the Basic Questions. This is the oldest existing book on Chinese medicine, and so this is sort of kind of the Bible of Chinese medicine. So this term release from the exterior was first described in Chapter 5 of this book. If a person harbors a pathogen, the body becomes soaked as the movement of protective qi to the exterior transforms fluids into sweat. Hence, When the pathogen is at the level of the skin, use sweating to discharge it. The first known text to list herbal formulas that embody this strategy is the early 3rd century work Discussion of Cold Damage, or Shanghanlong, which provides some of the most influential formulas in this category, such as the Fedra decoction Ma Huang Tang, cinnamon twig decoction Guizhi Tang, and their variants. Its focus on acrid, warming herbs to overcome obstruction from wind, cold, and dampness predominated medical practice until the Jin Yuan dynasties of the 12th to 14th centuries. Innovation until then consisted of extending the range of substances used to promote sweating rather than in seeking new areas of application. This changed in the 12th century with Liu Wansu's focus on heat pathogens, which led to the idea that heat in the exterior can occur there directly rather than being due to constraint caused by cold. Venting such heat requires the use of acrid cooling substances, which do not necessarily promote noticeable sweating. The treatment strategies and formulas composed by 17th and 18th century physicians like Ye Tianshi and Wuju Tang are associated with the warm pathogen current or school of thought and are most emblematic of this approach. Other innovations stemming from the Jin Yuan era are the combination of exterior venting with tonifying herbs to treat exterior excess combined with deficiency of qi, blood, or fluids in the interior, and the use of herbs to dispel pathogens from specific channels and their associated surface regions. Sweating is the first of the 8 methods of treatment formulated by the 18th century physician Cheng Guopeng, underlining its importance in clinical practice. Yet many practitioners continue to underrate this method. This is unfortunate because the odds of preventing the development of a serious condition are always better when intervention occurs at the early stage of an illness. It is best to treat diseases at the level of the skin and hair. The next best is to treat them at the level of the muscles and flesh. The next best is to treat them at the level of the sinews and vessels. The next best is to treat them at the level of the 6 yang organs. The next best is to treat them at the level of the 5 yin organs. When treating at the level of the 5 yin organs, half the patients die and the other half survive. And this is from that same book and chapter, Basic Questions, the Huangdi Neijing Su Wen, chapter 5. Successful use of the formulas discussed in this category will be aided by paying attention to the following principles. First, accurate diagnosis is essential. If an interior disorder develops before the exterior has been released, the practitioner must choose between releasing the exterior first or treating the exterior and interior simultaneously. If the formulas in this chapter are inappropriate for treating disorders solely of the interior, expressed rashes or edema due to deficiency. Likewise, it is important to be clear about the precise nature of the pathogenic influence to be released, as this determines the choice of formula. One must also be cognizant of the type of sweating to expect from a particular formula. Second, most of these formulas should be cooked briefly. They treat acute disorders and are prepared as decoctions or powders. They contain substances that are light and volatile in nature, which, if subjected to too much heat, lose their efficacy. Third, formulas taken hot after meals will provide the best results. Sweating is further encouraged by instructing the patient to bundle up after taking the medicine. As the goal of sweating is not sweating itself, but to assist the function of the protective qi, only a slight sweat over the entire body is needed to release the exterior. Excessive sweating dissipates the qi and fluids. Fourth, the formula and dosage should be adjusted to the individual's constitution, local climate, and season. For example, a person who sweats easily, lives in a warm climate, and contracts an illness during the spring or summer requires only mild treatment. On the other hand, A person who does not sweat easily, lives in a cold climate, and contracts an illness in the autumn or winter requires stronger treatment. So that was formulas that release the exterior, but let's talk about the subcategory that this herb is from, this formula is from, formulas that release exterior when cold. So Scheid and his team continue to describe the category. Wind cold disorders are marked by fever and chills predominant, wind and body aches, clear or white secretions, nasal discharge and sputum, and a floating pulse. There are many types of wind cold disorders, and all require the use of formulas that release pathogenic influences from the exterior by inducing sweating. By definition, all exterior cold disorders are excessive in nature. Depending on the body's defensive reaction, two major types can be differentiated in practice: cold damage, or Shanghong, and wind attack, or Zhongfeng. Cold damage is characterized by a strong defensive reaction to a strong pathogen. Cold blocks the circulation of protective qi and fluids in the outer layers of the body and closes up the interstices and pores, which prevents sweating. Meanwhile, internally, the constraint of protective and nutritive qi causes high fever and severe body aches. Patients displaying this pattern require a formula that strongly induces sweating. If the defensive reaction is characterized by disorder and disruption rather than complete obstruction, it is termed wind attack. In this case, although there is sweating, the condition does not improve. This is because the protective qi is unable to expel the pathogen. Treatment still requires sweating, but it must be accompanied by appropriate regulation and harmonization of the relationship between the protective and nutritive qi so that the sweating will achieve the goal of expelling the pathogen. The lungs focus on the skin and surface of the body and govern the dissemination and clarification of qi. Cold, externally contracted diseases often enter through the skin and disrupt the downward directing functions of the lungs, with such symptoms as cough and nasal congestion. Because cold has a tendency to congeal, which can lead to headaches and body pain from constraint and stagnation of the nutritive aspect, often warm, acrid, exterior-releasing herbs are matched with those that invigorate the blood and unblock the vessels. The tendency of cold to cause contraction also affects the fluids, transforming them into dampness or phlegm. There we go. That's our introduction to the categories, category and subcategory of this formula. So let's talk about the Chinese medical actions of this formula. So Scheid and his team say this formula, which is one of our major textbooks, say this formula induces sweating and dispels dampness while simultaneously draining interior heat. Chen and Chen, which is our other major textbook for formulas, say it induces diaphoresis or sweating and dispels dampness and clears interior heat. So basically, the Chinese medical actions are agreed upon by both of these textbooks. So let's talk about the indications, the Chinese medical indications. So that's the actions. That's what the formula does. But why would we take it? What are we looking for? What indications are we looking for this formula? So Scheid et al. Say this formula can be used for fevers and chills predominant, without sweating, headache, stiff neck. So it's without sweating, and it has headache, stiff neck, generalized aches and pain, slight thirst, a bitter taste in the mouth, a white tongue coating, and a floating pulse. This is externally contracted wind-cold dampness with concurrent internal accumulation of heat, characterized by fever and chills, with chills predominant, an absence of sweating, headache, and a stiff neck. The predominance of chills and the generalized aches and pains are the primary markers of externally contracted cold dampness. Heat accumulating internally produces slight thirst and a bitter taste in the mouth. The white tongue coating and floating pulse indicate that the pathogenic influences remain in the exterior. Chen and Chen say Jiaowei Qiāng Tang treats wind, cold, and dampness at the exterior and heat in the interior. Aversion to cold, fever, absence of perspiration, headache, neck stiffness, soreness, and pain of the body and limbs, a bitter taste in the mouth, thirst, and a white tongue coating, and a superficial pulse. So what's the history of this? So both Scheid and their team and Chen both agree on the source for this formula, which is this Si Nan Zhi, or hard-won knowledge, by Huang Hao Gu in 1308. So that's a relatively later formula. Like we said earlier, a lot of these formulas are based on cold damage or Shanghan Lung, and that's in the 3rd century. So this is 1,000 years after that. Over 1,000 years after that. So this is it's not, it's still, we're still 800 years or 700 years away from it. So it's still a while ago, but it's not one of the earlier formulas. Scheid and his team discusses the history of the formula under its commentary. Although this formula was not recorded until the Yuan dynasty, many commentators attribute its composition to the Song dynasty physician Zhang Yuan Su, the founder of the Yi Shui current in Chinese medicine, named after his native district in what is now Hebei province. He was the teacher of Li Dongyuan and Wang Haogu. We mentioned Wang Haogu just a few minutes, as the author of this formula. But we also, Li Dongyuan is a major, he kind of established the spleen and stomach school of Chinese medicine. He's very famous. So he's the teacher of both of these famous doctors. All of these physicians belong to a movement that rejected many of the pre-Song assumptions in medicine. This formula is typical of their style of prescribing, which encompassed 3 important innovations. First, a focus on the ascending and descending movement of the qi dynamic. Second, a concern with the action of herbs on particular channels. And third, a moving away from the use of fixed formulas for given conditions toward the idea of formulas as constituting models that could be flexibly adapted to the actual presenting signs and symptoms in clinical practice. Okay, so that was a little bit of the history there. Let's talk about the ingredients in this formula. So the first ingredient, it's Notopterygium formula. So our first ingredient is Notopterygii rhizoma subradix, so that's rhizomes and root, or Qiāng huo. And in this formula, we're using 4.5 grams powdered traditionally, but in decoctions today, we use 6 grams. It is from the warm, acrid herbs that release the exterior category, and its functions are it releases the exterior and disperses cold, unblocks painful obstruction and alleviates pain, guides qi to the greater yang channel and governing vessel. And in this formula, according to Scheid and his team, the chief herb, aromatic Notopterygii rhizoma subradix Qiāng huo, is the principal substance in the materia medica for dispersing exterior wind, cold, dampness. There you go. That's why it's here. Our second herb is Sapashnacovia radix, or feng feng, which again we're using it traditionally is 4.5 grams, but 6 grams in decoction. And again, it's from the warm acrid herbs that release the exterior. Its functions include expels wind dampness, alleviates pain, and stops spasms. And the analysis of this formula says 2 of the deputies, Sapashnacovia radix feng feng, and our next herb, Atractylotus rhizoma sangju, assist the chief herb in releasing the exterior and eliminating dampness. Our next herb is that Atractylotus rhizoma, or sangju. Again, we're using 4.5 grams traditionally, 6 grams in current Decoction. This herb is actually from a different category of herbs, aromatic herbs that transform dampness. And its functions, traditional functions, include strongly dries dampness and strengthens the spleen, induces sweating and dispels wind dampness, clears dampness from the lower burner, and improves the vision. There you go. Interesting. Our next ingredient is a sari herb or a xin. Traditionally 1.5 grams, a small amount is used, though in decoction 2 grams are used, so a little bit more. This is one of those herbs that is kind of on the bubble. It's not quite banned, but it's not quite easy to get. And so it's an interesting herb. It's a strong herb is the best way to say it. And again, this is from the category of warm, acrid herbs that release the exterior. Traditionally, it disperses cold and releases the exterior, dispels wind, disperses cold and relieves pain, warms the lungs and transforms thin mucus, and unblocking and facilitating the orifices. In an analysis of the formula, they say the other deputies is sari herba, xixin, chuangshang rhizoma, chuangshang, which we're going to talk about along with Angelica dehurica radix or bai zhi, assists the chief herb in releasing the exterior and treating the head and body aches. So that is this ingredient, xixin. Our next one is chuanshang rhizoma or chuanshang. Chuanshang, those are both first tone. And here we're using 3 grams, whether it's powdered or in decoction. And it's in the formula of herbs that regulate the blood. We mentioned that earlier, that we will often include a little bit of blood regulation in these release the exterior categories, herbs, formulas. And traditionally what this herb does is invigorates the blood, promotes the movement of qi, expels wind, so it's useful here, and alleviates pain. So you can see why it would be very useful. It's a great herb. It's actually a relatively commonly used herb, and it's fantastic. Our next herb, which we already mentioned, was Angelica dehurica radix, or bai zhi. And again, we're using 3 grams, whether it's decocted or in powder form. And this is also from a lot of these herbs are from the category of warm, acrid herbs that release the exterior. This herb expels wind, eliminates dampness, unblocks the nasal passages, and alleviates pain, reduces swelling and expels pus, and expels dampness and alleviates discharge. And now we get into our next herb. This one is Scutellaria radix or Huang Qin, 3 grams. And this is from the herbs that clear heat and dry dampness. According to Bensky and his team, this herb clears heat, dries dampness. These are the traditional actions. Clears heat, dries dampness, clears heat. Oh, I did that again. I got to change that here. Clears heat and resolves toxicity, clears heat and stops bleeding, and sedates ascendant liver yang. And the analysis of this formula says the assistants, Scutellaria radix Huang Qin, and Romania radix, Shengdi Wang, clear qi and blood level interior heat, respectively, treating the thirst and bitter taste in the mouth and also preventing the dry nature of the other herbs from injuring the fluids, which is interesting because this is a drain damp, so it is trying to drain fluids. But Shengdi Wang is nourishing of fluids. This is a good combination, actually. So let's talk about that Shengdi Wang. Romania radix, definitely one of the most commonly used herbs in Chinese medicine. We're using 3 grams in this formula, and this is in the formula in the category herbs that cool the blood. And traditionally, it clears heat and cools the blood, nourishes the yin, and generates fluids. And I think this is our last herb in the ingredient, and this is Glycericerae radix or Ganzao, which is absolutely the most commonly used herb in our formulas. This is licorice, very commonly used. 3 grams are used here. It's in the category of herbs that tonify the qi, and we're going to see why it's used in so many formulas when we look at its traditional actions right now. So it tonifies the spleen, augments the qi, moistens the lungs and stops coughs, moderates spasms and alleviates pain, and here's the reason why it's in so many formulas, and moderates and harmonizes the characteristics of other herbs. That's why it's in so many formulas. And the analysis of the formula says the envoy, Glycericerae radix gansao, harmonizes the middle burner and the actions of the other herbs. So you can see that's the reason why it's being used in this formula, is to harmonize and make it chill. Okay. Preparation. So Shida et al. Discusses preparation of this formula. The source text advises to coarsely grind the herbs. So that's all it does. You grind them. Chen says the source text states to grind the ingredients coarsely and cook the coarse powder in water to make a decoction. Today, this formula may be prepared as a decoction with the doses suggested in brackets, which I mentioned here. In addition, 3 slices of Xinjiang Rhizoma zingiberis recens, which is fresh ginger, and 3 stalks of Sangbai bulbous alii fistulosi, which is green onion, can be added to enhance the effects of unblocking yang qi and releasing the exterior. Commentary on this formula. As usual, Scheid and his team has an excellent commentary about this formula. Prior to the Song dynasty, seasonal feverish diseases were generally understood as cold damage disorders that, in the first instance, were to be treated by either ephedra decoction mawang tang or cinnamon twig decoction guizhi tang. Both of these formulas focus on the greater yang. The present formula accepts that wind cold dampness can invade any channel. Although its chief herb, Notopterygium Rhizoma radix Qiāng huo, still focuses on the greater yang channel, the remaining herbs all focus on other channels. Angelica dohurica radix, or baizhi, enters into the yang brightness channel and treats frontal headaches. Attractor lotus rhizoma sangju dispels dampness from the foot greater yin, allowing the clear qi to ascend and the turbid to descend. Chuanshuang rhizoma, or Chuanshuang, enters into the foot terminal yin channel and treats headaches at the crown of the head. Asari herba, or Xixin, enters into the foot lesser yin channel and opens the collaterals, while Sapashnikovia radix feng feng is considered to be a generalized wind herb that can enter into any channel to treat pain in the entire body. Scutellaria radix huangqin enters the hand's greater yin to drain heat accumulation from the chest. And Romana glutinosae radix, or shengti huang, depending on which text one follows, clears heat from the blood aspect of either the hand or foot greater yin. In this way, the formula extends its indications to all types of headache, as well as to painful obstruction patterns in any of these channels. In practice, the precise composition of the formula must be adjusted according to the location of the problem and the predominance of one pathogen over others. In Chinese medicine, this type of prescribing is referred to as discussing treatment on the basis of channel distribution, or Fenjing Lun. As the source text notes, one should examine the difference in the channels in the front and the back, on the left and right. Depending on differences in occurrence, intensity, and severity of symptoms, one increases or decreases the amount of individual herbs. If one sticks to this, one achieves miraculous results. A precedent for the use of acrid warm medicinals that induce sweating to resolve the exterior with cold herbs to treat internal heat accumulation already existed in Zhangzhang Jing's major blue-green dragon decoction, or Da Qinglong Tang. The disease mechanism, treatment strategy, and herbs used differ. However, in each case, major blue plurum dragon decoction treats heat, Da Qinglong Tang treats heat from constraint caused by cold fettering the exterior, which manifests as irritability and restlessness. In order to open this constraint, it relies on the cold and acrid herb Gypsum fibrosum, or Shirgao. In the reasoning underlying Shang Yuan Su's formula, it is assumed that dampness predominates, generating damp heat in the interior, particularly in persons with pre-existing dampness. For this reason, Qiāng uses the bitter cold herb Scutellaria radix huangqin, which dries dampness and drains heat. The very acrid nature of the formula, necessary in order to promote sweating, dry dampness, and open the channels, readily injures the fluids, making the inclusion of a cold moistening herb like Rhamania glutinose radix shengdi huang advisable. Influential commentators like Xu Da Chun, Wang Shu Gao, and Fei Bo Qiang argue, however, that the use of such a thick and cloying herb is only necessary if the heat is severe and the dryness is pronounced. In all other cases, they suggest the use of either Angelica sinensis radix or Dongui or radix paeonia xiaoyao. While treating patients with a disposition toward damp phlegm retention, modern practitioners go one step further and remove Rhamania glutinose radix shengdi huang, substituting herbs that move the qi and transform dampness, such as Magnolia officinalis cortex or whole po, and Citrus reticulate pericarpium chen pi. The combination of acrid warm herbs, thought to have an ascending nature with bitter cold herbs that direct qi downward, must also be viewed against the increased importance that the genuine innovators attached to the qi dynamic. These physicians reasoned that herbs like Notopterygium, Rhizoma radix, Qiāng Huo, Sapassionakovia radix, Feng Feng, or Atractylotus rhizoma, Sang Ju, raise the clear qi, a dynamic that not only corresponds to that of the spleen, but also to that of the lesser yang, and by implication to spring. This ascending movement dries dampness in the same manner that the warm spring winds dry the earth. It is for this reason that these herbs are also known as wind herbs or feng yao. And that's our commentary from Scheid. Chen also have a little small commentary, and they say Jiao Wei Qiang Huo Tang is a formula that can be used in all four seasons to treat conditions characterized by wind, cold, and damp factors at the exterior with heat in the interior. The main diagnostic symptoms include fever, aversion to cold, headache, absence of sweating, muscle aches and pains, a bitter taste in the mouth, and slight thirst. Modifications. So Scheid and his team discussed many modifications for this formula. For upper back and shoulder pain, add Gentianae, Macrophylla radix, or Qinjiao. Where there is an absence of thirst or bitter taste in the mouth, remove Scutellaria radix huangqin and Rhamania radix shengdi huang. For pronounced thirst and irritability, add Gypsum fibrosum shirgao and Anamorena rhizoma germu. Both of those are very cooling. So when they're saying there's pronounced thirst and irritability, they're also saying there's a lot of more heat going on here. For dry or sore throat, add Platycody radix jiegong, Arctii fructus neobongza, and Menthe haplocoalysis herba boha, that's field mint. For epigastric discomfort and distension with a greasy tongue coating, remove Rhamania radix shengdi huang and add Pogostomonas agastaches herba huo qiang and Pinellia rhizoma preparatum gerban sha. For coughing up a thick sputum, add Armanaceae semen xingren, that's apricot seed, and Pusidani radix Qiāng. So those are modifications from Scheid and his team. Chen also has several modifications. Make a note of that real quick. If there is severe pain caused by more damp accumulation, increase the dose of Qiāng Huo, Rhizoma et radix Notopterygium, and Sangju rhizoma atractylotus. If the pain is moderate or mild because there is less damp accumulation, remove Sangju rhizoma atractylotus and Xixin radix et rhizoma rosare. When there is a feeling of fullness and oppression in the chest caused by damp accumulation, remove Di Huang, radix Rhamania, and add Jur Chow fructus aurantii and Hopo cortex magnolia officinalis. If there is severe headache and add Gaoben, Rhizoma et radix ligustici. If there's no bitter taste in the mouth or thirst, lower the dose or remove Di Huang radix romania and Huang Qin radix scutellaria. With clear or watery nasal discharge, add Xinyi San magnolia flower powder. If accompanied by cough, add Cushing Ren, Semen Arminaceae amarum, and Jirsho San stop coughing powder. For vomiting or thirst, add Jirsho Fructus aurantii immaturis and Jiegong radix platycodonus. To enhance the exterior releasing functions, add Songbai, bulbous alii fistulosa, that's green onion, and Shenjiang rhizoma zingiberis recens, that's fresh ginger. We mentioned that earlier from Scheid et al. And that's all our modifications on this formula. That's a bit. So let's compare this formula. Scheid et al. Does compare this formula to another formula, and all other formulas treating exterior conditions. So it's kind of an interesting, it's all formulas treating exterior conditions, as well as a specific formula as well. Okay, so let's talk about other formulas that treat exterior conditions and how it compares to this. Although Nine-Herb Decoction with Notopterygium, Jiaowei Qiāng Tāng was specifically composed to treat exterior disorders, irrespective of the season, great care should be taken to distinguish its indications from those of ephedra decoction, Ma Huang Tang, and cinnamon twig decoction, Gui Zhi Tang, which do not treat dampness. In fact, it is the close association between dampness and the middle burner as the fulcrum of the qi dynamic that makes the focus on ascending and directing downward so important in understanding this formula. Its use should also be distinguished from formulas like three-seed decoction, Sanren Tang, whereas these formulas treat the simultaneous invasion of dampness and heat from the outside. Nine-Herb Decoction with Notopterygium, Jiaowei Qiāng Tāng, drains heat that accumulates in the interior because cold dampness inhibits the qi dynamic. Notopterygium decoction to overcome. So that's all other formulas. Now the other formula that this is compared to is this one. Is Notopterygium decoction to overcome dampness, or Qiāng Sheng Shi Tang. So similar, instead of Qiāng the formula that we're talking about here, it's a slightly different formula. It's Qiāng Sheng Shi Tang. Both formulas treat systemic wind dampness. Because Notopterygium decoction to overcome dampness, Qiāng Sheng Shi Tang focuses less on releasing the exterior, is indicated for conditions with mild exterior symptoms and relatively severe generalized pain and heaviness. Nine-Herb Decoction with Notopterygium, our formula today, Jiaowei Qiāng Tāng, on the other hand, is better for treating wind-cold dampness, fettering the exterior, accompanied by heat from constraint in the interior, characterized by aversion to cold with a fever, a bitter taste in the mouth, and slight thirst. So Chen also compares this formula to another formula. It's actually, Jiaowei Qiāng Tāng and Qiāng Sheng Shi Tang, Notopterygium decoction to overcome dampness. So this is comparing it to the same formula, actually. Both contain Qiāng rhizoma radix Notopterygii as the main ingredient, and both treat wind dampness at the exterior. Their differences are as follows. Jiaowei Qiāng Tāng dispels wind, cold, and damp factors from the exterior and clears heat from the interior. It mainly treats individuals who have both exterior and interior conditions with such symptoms as fever, aversion to cold, mild aches and pains, a bitter taste in the mouth, and slight thirst. Qiāng Sheng Shi Tang strongly dispels wind dampness. It primarily treats heaviness, immobility, and pain in the head and upper body. So that's Chen's comparison. What are the biomedical indications for this formula? Scheid and his team say with the appropriate presentation, this formula may be used to treat a wide variety of medically defined disorders, including the common cold, migraine, urticaria or hives, sinusitis, facial nerve palsy, torticollis or stiff neck, fibromyalgia, torticollis in general. It actually had a second time. This is a direct copy, so you put it in twice. torticollis tenosynovitis, lumbar strain, erysipelas, acute myocarditis, which is that's inflammation of the heart. That's serious, and rheumatoid arthritis. Chen say this formula has many clinical applications, including the common cold, influenza, arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, sciatica, urticaria, muscle aches and pains, migraines, and headache. So what does the science say on this? Chen lists several clinical studies with positive findings involving this formula. One is treating sciatica in 38 patients. So that's a very, very small study. Remember, we like to see at least 30 to 40 subjects in a study so that we can actually apply population statistics to it. So this is barely statistically valid. A modified version of this formula was studied for treating wind damp headaches in 28 patients. So that does not hit our threshold for population statistics. And another study of 152 patients used a modified version of this formula for treating acute urticaria. So that's a larger formula, a larger study. Still, relatively small study. But there you go. That's urticaria for you. No systemic reviews of Jiao Wei Qiang Huo Tang were found on a literature search. And when I say literature search, usually when I'm looking for reviews, I'm looking on Google Scholar because that's easy for me to do at home. But I also will specifically look and put in the things into the Cochrane Library, which has really high level systematic reviews of various conditions. So if it's there, it's useful. And I definitely did do that here and didn't find anything. Let's talk a little bit about drug-herb interactions. Few herbs in this formula may present risks for drug-herb interactions. Several show cytochrome P450 interactions, which is one of the risk factors for drug-herb interactions. Glycyrrhizide radix gonçal may induce cytochrome P450 subtypes 2C19 and 3A4. Romania radix shendiwang may induce cytochrome P450 3A4. Huangqin radix scutellaria may inhibit CYP, cytochrome P450, 2C9, 2E1, and 3A4. So some induce 3A4, some inhibit 3A4. 3A4 is usually our main target. About 40 to 60% of drugs will utilize cytochrome P450, 3A4 in metabolism. So that becomes their important target there. A large epidemiological study, N equals 1,795, so that's pretty darn large, showed increased adverse effects in patients taking Chaihu, Zhizhe, Wuweizi, Shu and Shengdi Huang, which is in this formula, and Mutang and Che Qianzi with clozapine, quetiapine, and olanzapine. So those drugs in particular. A case was reported of congestive heart failure and hypokalemia, or too little potassium in the blood, in a patient taking gonçal, licorice, furosemide, and digoxin, which, digoxin alone can cause a lot of interesting issues. And so, but you certainly want to avoid gonçal. I personally, digoxin is a neurotherapeutic index drug. I would not combine that with any herbs personally. Gonçal may increase blood pressure and fluid retention when used with oral contraceptives, as shown in 2 case studies and an uncontrolled human study. So that's weak clinical evidence, but it is still clinical evidence. So we do need to take it into account. So what are some concerns about this formula? So Scheid and his team say, due to its acrid and drying nature, this formula is contraindicated in warm pathogen diseases, including damp warmth disorders. It should be used with great care in patients who tend toward yin deficiency. Chen say, Jiao Wei Qiang Huo Tang contains many warm, acrid, and drying herbs. It should be used with caution in patients with yin, qi, or body fluid deficiencies. This formula is contraindicated in patients with wind heat, yin deficient heat, or generalized weakness and deficiency with heat. Okay, well, that is our formula for today. That was today's formula, Jiao Wei Qiang Huo Tang, or Nine-Herb Decoction with Notopterygium. A useful formula for treating colds or external attacks with dampness and internal heat. It appears to be a relatively safe formula to be used under these specific circumstances. And we started off by briefly introducing postbiotic supplements. All in all, this was another exploration into a fascinating and useful Chinese formula. In 2 weeks, we are going to be looking at another single Chinese herb, Zhizi, Gardenia fructus, or gardenia fruit, sometimes also called Cape jasmine fruit. This herb is in the Chinese medical subcategory of drain fire under clear heat herb category. It is an important herb for draining heat, cooling blood, and resolving dampness. As usual, we will explore all the intricacies of this herb as well as an explanation of its category. And as always, we will look at something a little different. Join us in 2 weeks for another interesting episode. And I'd like to say thank you very much. If you like this podcast, please do us a huge favor. Subscribe to our podcast in your favorite podcast app. We really appreciate you even thinking about doing that. Thank you. Or giving us a 5-star review. We'd love that as well. We really appreciate that. And even just for thinking about it, we appreciate it. And don't forget our amazing continuing education deal at that www.integrativeMedicineCouncil.org/CEUS1. What an amazing deal. You can always get in touch with me at Dr. Greg at spurbsherbs.com. That's SPERBSHERBS.com, or at our website, www.spurbsherbs.com. Thank you very much. And here's our bibliography. And thank you.
Spurbs Herbs.
The proceeding was presented by Dr. Greg Sperber. We would like to thank Janelle for all her support and everybody else who contributed to this program.
Janelle.
Timothy
Thompson.
Dobbins.
Rogers.
Campbell.